I thought I'd start off, I'm in a slightly unusual situation today, in the sense that my specialism, if you like, is with students at a pre-university level. So I thought I'd start off by giving some kind of background about myself, to give you some kind of context to the rest of what I'm going to say. I've spent 23 years in education, most of that time in schools where students are aged between 3 to 18, and most of that time overseas. I've spent more time teaching overseas and leading schools overseas than I have actually spent in the UK. So 23 years in education. I spent 5 years as an independent school inspector in the UK. I'm currently principal, but only for 2 more weeks, of an independent sixth form college, not very far from here, based in London, offering A-levels to British and international students. And I suppose it'd be fair to say my interest or specialism really is in secondary education. And the reason why I'm really standing here today in front of you is because I'm involved with working with the cultural attaché on a program for Libyan students coming on a very specific scholarship program. Specifically, students interested in studying for medical and engineering programs in the UK. Now, if I can get this to work. Right. One of the interesting things that I found when I started working on this is a response from a very small number of people with regards to A-levels. Now, A-levels, if you don't know, are qualifications that students typically take at 16 years old, and they're a pre-university qualification. And somebody said to me, A-levels for international students? Are you mad? What a waste of time. They're designed for English students. International students would never be able to do A-levels. And I was quite taken aback that somebody would say something like that to me. I was taken aback because I spent most of my life overseas teaching in international schools, leading international schools where most of the students are international, and they've taken A-levels and done extraordinarily well. I'm still principal, as I said, for the next 2 weeks, at sixth form college, where 60% of the students are international, coming from 41 different nationalities around the world, and where nearly 70% of those students will, in September, enter into Russell Group universities. And to give some kind of context to the English education system and the flexibility it has in allowing students to access higher education. Last year, 71,000 students, undergraduate students, from outside of the EU, from outside of Britain, were studying at undergraduate level. That represented 13% of all the students at undergraduate level in the UK. The UK university sector has a long tradition of working with many different nationalities, has a high degree of flexibility. And perhaps, I think, that is one of its main strengths, that it's always tried to be flexible. And the English education system, once you get beyond the age of 16, becomes a highly competitive environment, and an environment which can change very fast and support students in many different ways. But to come back to my specific project, the challenge, really, for my organisation and for the students coming out from Libya is to do with a very small group of students in the context of many of the programmes that I've been witnessing and listening to over the last 2 days, but between 60 to 90 students coming over from Libya on a scholarship programme, with very specific objectives in mind. The students would like to complete their pre-university studies in 24 months. That's a timescale we're talking about. They're coming over with a specific interest in accessing medic and engineering courses. The ages will be between 18, 19, perhaps up to the age of 20, and all of the students will have finished their high school in Libya. Now, there's a couple of potential problems immediately that spring to mind when I was looking at this programme and discussing this with my colleagues. The first thing is the acquisition of English. Anybody who's interested in going onto a medic programme of almost any type will need to be able to, by the time they walk through that university entrance, need to be able to speak English up to an IELTS level of about 7. That's pretty fluent. The transition of learning styles. I know from experience that many international students will come from education programs which concentrate on memory recall as the most important factor in passing examinations, whereas A-levels concentrate on understanding, and understanding is the key criteria for doing well at examinations. I'd argue that students very quickly learn that new style of education because it's a very natural way to actually learn. UK universities are competitive. Entrance to UK universities is competitive. One of my experiences of teaching overseas was in Spain. And in Spain, for the vast majority of universities, once you pass your high school certificate, you have the right to go to university. In the UK, everybody has the right to go to university. Every university has got the right to refuse to accept you. And it is a highly competitive environment. Preparation for university entrance can be surprisingly more complex than you might imagine. If you're interested in medicine or medical-related programs, the first thing you trip up on is the UK CAT preparation tests. But it doesn't only apply to medical programs. There's a whole range of programs where additional qualifications are actually required. On top of that, for the Libyan scholarship students, there's an issue of finance. If you look at some of the independent schools offering A-levels in the UK, it's not unusual to see independent schools asking for fees of around £30,000 a year. So an issue of finance needs to be addressed and how those students are going to be financed. The other issue is that students will only be identified in August. Students still have to get their visas. Effectively, that pushes back the start date for most students. Now, this programme is of particular interest because it raises some really big issues. Anybody who's involved in secondary education in the UK will tell you the most difficult degree programme to get into at undergraduate level is medicine. Last year, for every medical place that was available, over 10 students applied for every medical place that is available. Not only that, because so many people are applying, universities ask for work experience. They ask for people who understand or are able to discuss ethics. They set very high demands for English language requirements for students wanting to go into university. And as I said before, that's typically about IELTS of 7 or 7.5. So without spending too much time talking about some of the solutions to these problems, the first thing that is important is rigorous selection of students to scholarships. And I hope to tie this up at the end in my concluding remarks, but for students coming in for specific programs, what's absolutely important is making sure that the students that are selected for these programs are realistic candidates for these programs. The students are going to need specific language preparation courses. They're going to need to be recognised and identified what those targets they will need to achieve, what level of English do they need to achieve, in order to have any chance of success at a later stage. The other requirements, and something that I've always felt is absolutely key to making sure students are motivated, is explain to students what universities want. So if you want to go to a university, what is that university looking for? And it's absolutely key in terms of motivating students that they understand what it is they have to do to be able to be successful. And of course, sometimes that can be quite a negative experience for some students. Because in order to be honest, we sometimes have to say to students that you're going to struggle to get to what you achieve, but here's an alternative route for you. And that's part of that as well. It does mean working closely with partner institutions. What we are seeing developing in the UK, and it's still at a very early stage, are programs designed for medicine and other programs as well, specifically for the international students, which address international students' needs. So just to give a very brief oversight how we envisage this program working. Students arriving from Libya with IELTS of 5.5 or above. And I've made an assumption here that everybody understands what IELTS is. IELTS is an English language qualification, which is pretty much standard around the world. And it tends to be used in the UK rather a lot. If they have an IELTS of 5.5 or above, they will start in an 18-month A-level program. Usually an A-level program takes 2 years. It is quite achievable in 18 months. And alongside their A-level studies, they will continue to study English. And that should give them ample time to make sure that English is good enough, i.e. they've reached a level of 7 by the time they walk into the university door, and they've got plenty of time to improve their language study skills and improve and prepare for A-level examinations. More likely, we think, that students will have a lower level of English than 5.5, in which case they need something very different. They will have to improve their English before they commence on either a medical foundation course or start doing A-levels over the course of 1 year. I'll come back to that in a second. Students typically, before they start their A-levels, will need to reach a level of 5.5, if not 6, which would be better. They will then have a pre-intensive, pre-sessional A-level program to make them aware of what A-levels are demanding in terms of study and the level of preparation. And then they'll either embark on a 1-year medical foundation program or a 1-year A-level program. Now, a 1-year A-level program is demanding, and it's difficult, and it's not easy. It's not impossible. As a principal, part of my job, and I must interview perhaps 200 to 300 students a year to give them advice about what they should do. An A-level program over 1 year is possible for students who've got the right academic background and have got the maturity to be able to handle the level of study and intensity of study required. But of course, this goes back to making sure the students selected for these programs are the right students. I wanted, before going on, to say something about engineering. And without dismissing engineering, in terms of opportunity for engineers, it's a very different level of challenge in terms of university entrance compared to medicine. Within the UK, there's a wide range of engineering courses, undergraduate courses, differing in the levels of demand from A-star A perhaps, it's somewhere like Imperial. The whole range of A-level choices are available, and students have many opportunities to enter universities. There are problems. Mathematics is absolutely key and can often surprise people by the level of mathematics which is required. There are specific language demands, but typically, compared to medicine, where you'd have to reach an IELTS of 7 or 7.5, typically for engineering, it's going to be 6 or 6.5. And the summing up, my last slide, I'm sure you'll be pleased to hear, is the ingredients for success. And I believe these ingredients for success can be applied to any educational program in the UK. But the first thing that is really important is to identify academic criteria for making sure the right students go in the right programs. Without that, it would be wrong to put students into a program in which they have very little chance of succeeding. It is important to make sure those students who choose to come on a particular program want to do it. One of the biggest problems I have when dealing with medical students is that many of the students don't really want to be doctors. Their parents want them to be doctors. Their relatives want them to be doctors. The reality is, medical schools are extraordinarily good at identifying who actually wants to be a doctor and identifying those students whose parents want them to be a doctor, and there's quite a big difference between those two things. The level of motivation to go on to be successful in medicine is extraordinarily high. Without really wanting to do it, you're unlikely to be successful. Secondly, we need to make sure that students understand what universities are going to be asking them to do and what criteria they're going to set for those students. There should never be any false expectations. Students, young people, are remarkably good at rising to a challenge, but they need to know what that challenge is, so they've got time to prepare for it and get themselves mentally prepared for it. It does mean working closely with partner institutions, so they know what to expect from the students coming in. That flexibility I talked about earlier on really is very important, but of course, institutions need to understand what the demands and the needs are for those students too. And so I guess my final message really is that the English education system is highly flexible. It's able to support international students within the UK or coming to the UK to study. But for me, the key to successful collaboration is communication and transparency is absolutely key to any successful collaboration attempt. I hope my organisation can play a part in that, and thank you very much for listening to me. I'm very aware I'm the second last speaker and you're about to vote on how good the speakers have been, but thank you very much.